So figures from the London Ambulance Service show that ambulance response times in Kingston have fallen by almost 10%, and that hospital waiting times are also falling behind, with only 90.8% of patients visiting A&E being seen within 4 hours, which is significantly less than national targets of 95%. What do you propose can be done to reduce these waiting times to meet national targets?
This all comes down to one thing, and it's not just an issue in Kingston, it's a national issue, and that is that our NHS is being pulled apart, it's being fragmented, underfunded, and it's being privatised, and we're staunchly against that. We think healthcare is a basic human right, it should be free, it should be publicly funded and free at the point of use. So we think first and foremost we need to scrap the Health and Social Care Act. We're proposing or supporting the NHS reinstatement bill, to kind of restore the NHS to the way that it should be, and make sure the Secretary of State is responsible for healthcare again, because the Tories and Lib Dems have changed that, so the Secretary of State is no longer responsible for healthcare. We also think we need to renegotiate PFI deals that Labour brought in, that are crippling the NHS financially as well. Really what it's going to come down to is returning the NHS to its former glory, basically, and I think that will solve all these problems. It just comes down to stopping privatisation, keeping our NHS public.
Yeah.
Well, you're right, yeah. I mean, in 1997, I'll go back a bit here to give a bit of historical context. The Tories left the NHS in a dire state. There were people, once again we had A&E times that were going well over 4 hours. People were waiting over 18 months for routine operations, and people waiting in hospital corridors, to get into beds in very undignified positions. Now, Labour rescued the NHS back in 1997. We invested heavily, built new hospitals, and it employed thousands more doctors and thousands more nurses and midwives. And up to the point that in 2010, the NHS had the highest public approval rating that it ever had. Now, since 2010, the NHS has gone downhill, as it does every single time the Tories get into power, this time aided by the Liberal Democrats. And they've underfunded the NHS, and they've embarked on a disastrous £3 billion top-down reorganisation that focuses the NHS, makes its key priority making profits for shareholders rather than focusing on patients. So the NHS sadly needs rescuing again, and the Labour Party are proposing a time to care fund, which will involve 8,000 more GPs, 20,000 more nurses, 5,000 more midwives, 3,000 more care workers, and we're going to integrate the mental health, social care and physical health into one health and care social system. But what that needs in order to get that done is a lot of integration. If you think about it, a lot of cooperation between hospitals, a lot of integration of services, which is quite the reverse of what we've got under the Tories and Lib Dems, which is fragmentation and privatisation and competition. So we're going to abolish the Health and Social Care Act, which fragments the NHS, bring it back into public hands, and we're going to put together a rescue package.
Well, so TUSC stands for a free and a high quality and a well-funded NHS that's open to everybody, and we would hope that it would be high quality in that people will be seen quickly as well. I think it's fair to say that these problems are the result of cuts to the NHS. I think that it's fair to say that these problems would not exist if the NHS budgets had not been cut, if staff had not been cut. And this is really a problem of privatisation, or kind of the slow privatisation of the NHS. So there's a pattern when things are privatised, when public services are privatised. The first thing that happens is that the wages of the people who work in those systems and in those services are cut. And after that, the services are slowly suffocated, slowly strangled in money, so that they are no longer useful and viable services. And at that point, the government will swoop in and say, this is no longer a viable service, it's not working, we need to sell it off, we need to privatise it, we need more investment. And this is exactly what we're seeing with the NHS. So there's a public sector pay freeze that came into effect, I think, in 2010. And in real terms, the wages of the staff in the NHS have fallen by about 12% since that time. Of course, the cuts have continued to come to the NHS services in general. So I think that the best thing that we can do is to protect the NHS from privatisation, either through the PFIs, the Private Finance Initiative, or through something which is a little more worrying, which is TTIP. Through TTIP. So the best thing that we can do is protect it, make sure that it's a service that is fully funded and is a service that we can still be proud of. You know, the NHS is one of the most kind of compassionate and humane public services in the world, and I think that we should fight to keep it that way.
I think one of the disappointing things in the national campaign at the moment is that the NHS is being used as a political football. The NHS is not the property of any particular political party, and the Conservative Party wants to make sure that the NHS is free at the point of use for everyone in the country. Now, I spend time up at Kingston Hospital. I go there volunteering every other week as a dining companion helping patients lunchtime, and I spent a week there last summer, including in A&E, and I saw the staff's fantastic efforts to cope with the pressures on the accident and emergency department. I'm sure that the hospital and the ambulance service will want to improve their performance against those targets. And what the Conservative Party's done as part of the coalition government has invested £2 billion in the NHS, which is what Simon Stevens, the chair of NHS England, or the chief executive of NHS England, said was required. And we've said that we will ring-fence the NHS budget year on year as we go through the next Parliament. So we've done what NHS England asked for, and we are certainly a party which is going to stand up for and protect the NHS, as well as the local MP here.
Well, Kingston Hospital, over a longer period in the A&E, has actually had a pretty good record. It was pretty bad when I first became the MP, and we campaigned very hard to get the new accident emergency. That was opened, I think, 2001. We got the money just a bit before then, took a while to build. But it's now a really good A&E, and it functions very well. It's one of the busiest A&Es, certainly in South London, if not the whole of the capital. But you're right, there have been pressures in recent times, and I think there's two reasons for that. If you look at and talk to the London Ambulance Service, they're having problems recruiting ambulance drivers because of the need to pay more people in London, and because it's such a high-pressure job in London. And a lot of their drivers and their trained paramedics have been going to other parts of the country where the cost of living is less and they get a better living wage, if you like. So I think we've got to look at that to make sure the ambulance service has the people, has the skilled people that we need. But we also need to look at what's called so-called bed blocking. Not a very attractive phrase, but actually when the elderly people are in hospital, and actually if you look at the people in hospital, they tend to be more elderly. We need, when they are properly treated and they're ready to leave hospital, a place for them to go. Sometimes that is back to their home, if the home can be adapted. Sometimes it's into a care home. And what's called the social care assessments sometimes take too long, and actually discharging them into a place that's safe and warm and comfortable for them, where they can get the care they need to rehabilitate, often takes too long. And that means that we haven't got the bed space. And because you've got not enough people going out quickly enough, that can cause problems for people coming in. So those are the sorts of issues. And when I talk to Kingston Hospital, I've visited countless times, and I talked to the chief executive, Kate Grimes is the current chief executive. I've dealt with 3 of her predecessors. This issue about bed blocking is absolutely fundamental. So that's a job for the local authority, and local authorities not just in Kingston but across the southwest London, because Kingston Hospital deals with about 4 or 5 local authorities. So I want to see those incentives for them to act better to help the hospital improved. I think if we did that, we'd see Kingston Hospital's performance going not just to the target, but